The fluorescent lights of the Chicago O'Hare terminal glared as I walked toward my gate, the rhythmic clack of my Italian leather shoes echoing through the nearly empty corridor. Delayed flights had a way of draining energy, but I'd grown accustomed to it over the years. Building Walker Technologies from scratch had demanded sacrifices, long hours, and sleepless nights. I never minded. Success always came with a price dot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from Laura. Landing soon. I glanced at it, a familiar unease settling over me. Something about her messages had felt off lately, robotic, as if generated to mimic affection. Her replies had grown stilted and brief. I pocketed my phone, forcing myself to brush off the doubts. Laura was my wife of 20 years. We had built a life together, hadn't we? The boarding gate was quiet, almost serene. I settled into my first-class seat, politely declining the flight attendant's offer of champagne. My thoughts raced, circling back to the conversations I'd had before leaving for this business trip. Laura had been unusually insistent that I extend my stay, urging me to focus on securing a new deal. It wasn't like her to take such an interest in my work dot. As the plane climbed into the night sky, I distracted myself with contracts and emails, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. There was a message from Tom, my assistant and trusted friend for over 15 years. Need to discuss something in person. Tom was never cryptic. He was straightforward, even blunt. He'd been by my side from the start, back when Walker Technologies was just an idea scrawled on a whiteboard. I knew something serious had to be brewing. Touching down at the home airport hours later. I stepped through the quiet terminal, my shoes tapping against the polished floors. Everything about the return felt different, heavier. I slid into my Tesla, appreciating the familiar comfort as the car hummed to life. The drive home was a blur of darkened streets, scattered streetlights, and memories of countless late-night drives after grueling days at work. I should have felt relieved to be back. Instead, there was a cold pit in my stomach. When I pulled into the driveway of our Tudor-style home, light spilled from the kitchen window. It was almost midnight. Not late enough to be concerned, but still, I paused. I quietly unlocked the front door, stepping into the warm foyer. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered, but beneath it I caught a hint of something else. Unfamiliar cologne, faint but unmistakable. I moved quietly toward the kitchen, driven by instinct rather than logic. Just as I reached the doorway, I heard her voice, sharp and dismissive, cutting through the quiet. "Your dad's a convenient source, but it's time to move on," Laura said, her tone devoid of warmth. "Kenny's ready to step in." Kenny. The name sent a jolt through me. Kenny Matthews, her co-worker at the real estate firm. He'd been popping up in conversations for the past year. Too many mentions. My chest tightened as I leaned closer, straining to hear. "Once we have what we need, it'll be over," she continued, her voice low but firm. "He won't see it coming." I stepped back, each word crashing over me like a wave. Everything I thought I knew crumbled. I glimpsed her reflection in the window above the sink. She stood there, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her, holding a wine glass. Her lips were curled in a smile I no longer recognized. Betrayal never felt so vivid. The ground felt unstable beneath my feet, but I moved with silent precision, retreating into the shadows. Years of training my body through martial arts honed my reflexes, keeping me steady. My mind raced, processing every detail. Laura's late nights, her sudden interest in finances, the growing distance between us, it all fell into place with brutal clarity. And then, another voice cut in. It was my daughter, Tia. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice quieter but unmistakable. "We just have to wait." Hearing her voice, my little girl who used to code alongside me, who once idolized me, made the betrayal burn deeper. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay hidden. They were planning something together, my wife and my daughter. I backed out of the kitchen, every movement deliberate and quiet. When I reached the study, I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for support. The room that had always been my sanctuary felt suffocating. I pulled out my phone, needing a distraction. Tom's message flashed again. Need to discuss something in person. Did he know? Was he trying to warn me? I pushed down the rising wave of anger and opened my laptop. The home security system was there, cameras I'd installed myself for protection. Now, they'd serve a different purpose. I scrolled through footage, searching for clues I'd missed. I didn't need to confront Laura and Tia yet. I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. Anger could wait. Revenge would be all the sweeter when I had the evidence. The night passed in a haze of sleeplessness. I pored over financial records, cross-referenced transactions, and reviewed security footage. By dawn, the picture was clearer. Laura had access to funds I'd entrusted to her for emergencies, and she'd been moving money around incrementally with expert precision. Tia, my brilliant daughter, had been her accomplice, providing the tech-savvy edge they needed to manipulate systems I'd once considered impenetrable. I watched them through the surveillance feeds as morning light crept into the house. Laura, all charm and grace, carried on her routine as if nothing had changed. Tia, with a carefully maintained facade, hid any trace of guilt behind practiced smiles. It was infuriating and impressive in equal measure. I knew my next step. I needed more than just circumstantial evidence. This wasn't a business negotiation where I could rely on gut instincts. I would have to play their game, act the part of the oblivious husband and doting father. But I wouldn't be their fool for long. Laura greeted me with a cup of coffee as I descended the stairs. "Good morning," she said, her smile radiant. "I didn't hear you come in last night." I accepted the coffee, hiding my disgust. "I didn't want to wake you." Tia appeared, her eyes lighting up with what I now recognized as calculated affection. "You're back," she said, embracing me. I hugged her, feeling the weight of every lie she'd told. "Yes," I said, my voice betraying none of the storm inside me. "I'm back." The game had begun, and I intended to win. The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, casting warm light across the marble countertops. Laura moved gracefully, pouring orange juice and preparing breakfast, the picture of a loving wife. She smiled as if nothing had changed, as if our marriage hadn't been hollowed out by betrayal. It was impressive, really. She'd perfected her role. I sipped my coffee, every drop bitter. Tia sat beside me, her face a mask of casual cheer. "So, how was Chicago, Dad?" she asked, glancing up from her phone. "It was good," I replied, keeping my voice light. "Productive meetings." "Glad to hear it," Laura said, setting down a plate of pancakes. "I thought we might have a special dinner tonight. Celebrate your success." I met her eyes over the rim of my coffee cup. Sounds perfect. I had to play along. That much was clear. But every smile they offered felt like a fresh wound. They thought they had me fooled. They were wrong. After breakfast, I excused myself and headed to my office. It had always been my sanctuary, a space filled with memories of late-night coding marathons, breakthrough moments, and hard-fought victories. But now, it was a war room. I closed the door behind me, sitting down at my desk and opening my laptop. There was work to be done. My first call was to Tom. He picked up immediately, his voice steady but wary. "David." "We need to meet," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Now." "Understood." We agreed on the usual place, a coffee shop that had become our unofficial headquarters in the early days of Walker Technologies. I left the house without a word to Laura or Tia, trusting the security feeds to capture anything worth noting in my absence. The drive was a blur. My thoughts raced, replaying every conversation, every moment I'd brushed off as unimportant. Laura's insistence on joint accounts, Tia's gradual withdrawal, the late nights and whispered phone calls. It all made sense now. They'd played me for a fool. The coffee shop was quiet when I arrived, the morning rush having passed. Tom was already there, seated in the corner booth we always used. He looked up as I approached, his eyes scanning my face. Whatever he saw there made him sit up straighter. "Talk," I said, sliding into the booth. He leaned in, keeping his voice low. "Laura's been asking questions about the business, about offshore accounts, shell companies, our holdings. I denied her access, but it was unusual." "How long has this been going on?" I demanded. "Months, at least, maybe longer." Tom hesitated. "She tried to get information from other people, too, contractors, suppliers, but they know the protocol. No one gave her anything." The weight of it settled on my chest. Did you know about Kenny? Tom's eyes narrowed. Matthews? From her firm? I nodded. She and Tia were talking about him last night. They're planning something big. Tom's jaw clenched. That explains a lot. I've seen her car at his office. I thought it was business. So did I. I forced myself to stay calm. I need to know everything about him, every deal, every client, every connection. Consider it done. Tom paused. David, I need to ask. What are you planning? I met his gaze. Protecting what's mine. For the next hour, we strategized. Tom would dig into Kenny's background while I focused on securing my assets. Every dollar, every account, every contract. Laura and Kenny thought they were playing a game. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Back at the house, I slipped back into my role. Laura greeted me with a kiss, her touch sending a chill down my spine. Everything okay? Just work, I said, forcing a smile. You know how it is? She nodded, pretending to understand, but I saw through the act now. She was waiting for something, for me to slip up, to give her an opening. What's on your mind? I asked, feigning interest. Just thinking about the future, she replied, her smile calculated. There's so much we could do. Together. You're right, I said, my voice smooth. Together. I excused myself again, this time to the basement. It had always been a space for storage and the occasional DIY project, but it would serve another purpose now. I installed new surveillance equipment, discreet, state-of-the-art, impossible to detect. Every conversation, every whisper would be captured. I needed evidence, not just suspicion. Over the next week, I watched and listened. Laura continued her charade, playing the devoted wife. But when she thought I wasn't looking, she made calls. Always from the same spot in the garden, just out of earshot. Tia followed her lead, acting the part of a dutiful daughter while secretly meeting Kenny at coffee shops. The surveillance footage showed everything, their smiles, their plans, their betrayal. I met with my lawyer in secret, ensuring that every asset was protected. The accounts Laura thought she controlled were quietly moved, restructured, hidden behind layers of legal protection. The company she planned to take from me was fortified. If she tried to make a move, she would find nothing but walls. One evening, Laura approached me, her smile as bright as ever. David, I was thinking we should go away for the weekend, just the two of us. Sounds nice, I said, playing along. Where did you have in mind? Anywhere, she said, her eyes searching mine. We need time to reconnect. She was testing me, looking for weakness. I'll check my schedule. Don't work too hard, she said, brushing her hand against my arm. Family comes first. Of course, I replied, my smile never faltering. Always. I watched her walk away, knowing the game was reaching its climax. Soon, she and Kenny would make their move, and I would be ready. One night, I found myself standing outside Tia's room. I hesitated before knocking, unsure of what I hoped to accomplish. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, but quickly masked it. Dad, she said, her voice strained. What's up? Just checking in, I said, trying to sound casual. How's school? Fine, she replied, her eyes darting away. Busy? I wanted to tell her I knew, that I heard every word, every lie. I wanted to ask why she'd turned against me, but I couldn't. Not yet. I'm proud of you, I said instead. She looked at me then, really looked at me. For a moment I thought I saw regret, but it passed quickly, replaced by the mask she'd learned to wear. Thanks. I nodded, feeling the weight of everything unsaid. Good night, Tia. Good night, Dad. I walked away knowing I had lost her. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back. As the days passed, I continued my silent war. The cameras captured every conversation, every secret meeting. Laura and Tia were playing their roles perfectly, too perfectly. It was almost impressive how effortlessly they switched between being my family and plotting my destruction. One afternoon, I sat in my office reviewing footage of Laura's latest phone call with Kenny. Her tone was soft, affectionate. She spoke about me like I was an obstacle, a piece on a chessboard to be maneuvered around. Every word cut deep, but I forced myself to keep watching. The more evidence I gathered, the more control I'd have when the time came. Tom's reports were becoming more detailed by the day. Kenny Matthews, real name Kenneth Morrison, was a con man with a long history of scams. Failed real estate ventures, defrauded investors, even a trail of legal issues that had somehow never caught up with him. He was good. I had to give him that. But not good enough. I called Tom late one night. Any updates? He's in deeper than we thought, Tom said, his voice tense. He's got connections to some questionable investors, people you don't want to cross. It looks like he's promised them access to your AI project. I clenched my fist. The project is locked down. For now, Tom replied. But Laura's been trying to access it. She's made multiple attempts using your credentials. If she gets in, she could do serious damage. She won't, I said, my voice hard. Set up a decoy. A decoy? Something that looks real enough to fool her and Kenny, I explained. Let them think they're winning. Understood, Tom said. And David, be careful. They're getting desperate. I ended the call, staring at the darkened window. Desperation made people dangerous. I needed to be ready. The next morning, Laura suggested we have dinner together. She framed it as a romantic evening, a chance to reconnect. I agreed, knowing it was another move in her game. We went to one of our favorite restaurants, a place we'd celebrated anniversaries and milestones. She wore the dress I'd bought her for our last trip to Paris. It was all so meticulously crafted. Over appetizers, she brought up the business. I know things have been stressful lately, she said, her voice soft. If there's anything I can do to help, just say the word. Thank you, I said, matching her tone. I've been thinking about some changes. Changes? She leaned in, her eyes bright with feigned curiosity. Reallocating resources, I said vaguely. Reevaluating priorities. She nodded as if she understood. I'm here to support you, David, whatever you need. Good, I said, holding her gaze. I'll keep that in mind. The rest of the evening passed in strained pleasantries. Laura was good at this, pretending everything was fine, pretending she cared. But I saw through it all. When we got home, she kissed me goodnight and whispered, I love you. I didn't say it back. That night. I watched more footage. This time it was Tia. She was meeting Kenny again, this time in a secluded park. She handed him a folder, my folder. Inside were documents she'd stolen from my office, information about the AI project, about upcoming contracts. Kenny patted her shoulder like a father might. It made my stomach turn. Good work, he said, flipping through the papers. Your dad never sees this coming. Tia nodded, but she looked away quickly. Was there guilt in her eyes? Regret? I couldn't tell. It didn't matter. The next morning I confronted her in a different way. I called her into my office, asking her to sit. She hesitated, but did as I asked. I pulled out one of the college acceptance letters I'd helped her earn, the one to her dream school. You've worked so hard for this, I said, keeping my tone even. I'm proud of you. Thanks, she said, avoiding my gaze. You're going to do great things, I continued. I've set up a fund for your tuition. You'll never have to worry about money while you're in school. Her hands clenched in her lap. You don't have to do that. Of course I do, I said. I'm your father. Her eyes darted to the floor. I have to go. She fled the room before I could say anything more. I watched her go, feeling the weight of every lie, every betrayal. Whatever guilt she felt wasn't enough. She'd made her choice. A few days later, the trap was set. Laura and Kenny fell for the decoy project, believing they'd gained access to something valuable. Their excitement was palpable. They made plans to sell it, to cash in on what they thought was my life's work. I recorded every word, every moment. The time had come to confront them. I waited until late evening when Tia was out and Laura was alone in the house. I found her in the living room, sipping wine. She looked up as I entered, smiling. Join me? No, I said, my voice cold. We need to talk. She set her glass down, tilting her head. What's wrong? I know everything, I said, stepping closer. You, Kenny, the plans you've been making. Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. David, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice hard. I've seen the footage. I've heard the conversations. You think I'm a fool? Her eyes narrowed. You've been spying on me? Yes, I said without hesitation, and it's over. She stood, trying to regain control. You can't just— I can and I have, I interrupted. Every account you thought you controlled, gone. Every asset you thought you'd take, secured. You and Kenny are done. She glared at me, her facade crumbling. You think you're so clever. You think you've won. I don't think, I said, stepping closer. I know. She slapped me hard. I didn't flinch. You ruined everything, she hissed. No, Laura, I said, my voice ice cold. You did. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. The divorce papers were waiting on the kitchen counter. She could take them or leave them. It didn't matter to me. I was done playing her game. In the days that followed, I dismantled every piece of their plan. Kenny tried to fight back, but he was no match for me. I had the evidence, the connections, the power. He went down fast and hard, leaving Laura to pick up the pieces. Tia tried to reach out, but I ignored her calls. She'd made her choice, and I had to live with mine. I moved into a new place, leaving the house and all its memories behind. I built walls around myself, walls that no one would ever break again. The game was over and I had won. But victory tasted hollow. I'd saved everything I'd built, but I'd lost everything that mattered. I moved out the next day. The house that had been my sanctuary, my home, was now a monument to betrayal. Laura didn't try to stop me. I think she knew better. She must have seen it in my eyes. The resolve, the cold finality. There was no more pretending. We were done. I moved into the penthouse, a place I'd kept in the back of my mind for years, but never truly considered as a permanent home. It was modern, sleek, and entirely impersonal. Everything the house wasn't. Maybe that was why it felt right. I needed the distance. I needed to remind myself that nothing could touch me anymore. I spent my first night there surrounded by silence, the city's lights sprawling below like a grid of stars. I didn't sleep much, but that was nothing new. Sleep had become a luxury I couldn't afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Laura and Tia, laughing behind my back. Kenny's smug smile. It was all a loop I couldn't break. The next morning, I focused on work. It was what I did best, after all, distracting myself, burying myself in numbers and data. I met with Tom at a private office I'd set up just for these situations. He handed me a thick file, his expression grave. Kenny's been busy, he said, flipping open the folder. Real estate scams, investment fraud, multiple aliases. He's been doing this for a long time. How long? I asked, my voice hard. Over a decade, Tom replied. He's left a trail of broken lives behind him. Yours is just the latest in a long line. Not for long, I said, leaning back in my chair. What else? Tom hesitated. He's got some dangerous connections, people who don't take kindly to being double-crossed. Good, I said. That means he'll be distracted. David, Tom said, his voice low. This is getting dangerous. It already is, I replied. We're too deep to back out now. Tom nodded reluctantly. What do you want to do? Expose him, I said, my voice firm. Publicly, thoroughly, I want him ruined. Tom leaned forward. You're sure about this? I met his gaze. I've never been more sure of anything. We spent hours strategizing, building a case that would leave Kenny with nowhere to hide. Every scam, every lie, every fraud he'd committed, it was all documented, all ready to be unleashed. I would burn his entire world to the ground. But as I sat there plotting his downfall, I couldn't ignore the nagging thought in the back of my mind. This wasn't just about Kenny. It was about Laura, too, about Tia, about everything I'd lost. That night, I returned to the penthouse, exhaustion weighing heavy on me. I poured a glass of whiskey and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city. It felt like I was looking down on a battlefield, the ruins of my life scattered below. My phone buzzed, a message from Tia. I hadn't heard from her since I'd moved out. She'd tried calling a few times, but I'd ignored her. I couldn't face it, but this time I opened the message. Dad, we need to talk. Please. I stared at the words, my chest tight. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to hear her excuses, but a part of me, a part I hated, wanted answers. I replied. Come to the penthouse, tomorrow, 7 p.m. The next day, she arrived on time. The security guard called up, and I told him to let her in. When the elevator doors opened, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked tired, older somehow. I realized with a pang that I hadn't really seen her in weeks, not since the night everything fell apart. Hi, she said, stepping into the room. She looked around, taking in the stark, empty space. This place is Cold, I finished for her. It suits me. She nodded, her eyes sad. You're really not coming back, are you? No, I said, keeping my voice flat. I'm not. She sank into one of the chairs, her shoulders slumping. I'm sorry. For what? I asked, crossing my arms. For betraying me? For helping Mom and Kenny? Or for getting caught? Tears welled up in her eyes. All of it. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't, not anymore. You knew what you were doing, I said, my voice hard. You made a choice. It wasn't that simple, she said, her voice cracking. Mom, she made it sound like you didn't care, like you were always too busy for us. That's a lie, I said, anger boiling inside me. You know that. Do I? She asked, her voice rising. When was the last time you were really there, Dad? When was the last time you put us first? Her words cut deep. So that justifies what you did? No, she said, shaking her head. Nothing justifies it. I was wrong, I know that, but I'm still your daughter. Not anymore, I said, my voice cold. You made your choice. She stood, her eyes blazing. I made a mistake. I'm trying to fix it. It's too late, I said, turning away. There's no going back. I heard her footsteps, heard the elevator doors close. I stayed where I was, staring out at the city, trying to ignore the pain that was tearing me apart. In the weeks that followed, the plan came together. Tom and I worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, building a case that would bring Kenny down. We released everything at once, documents, recordings, testimonies from people he'd wronged. The fallout was immediate. Kenny's empire crumbled, his allies turned on him, his reputation was destroyed. I watched it all unfold from the penthouse, feeling nothing. Kenny was finished, just as I'd promised. Laura was next. She tried to fight back, tried to salvage what little she had left, but it was useless. I'd cut her off from everything, money, influence, connections. She was alone. One day, she showed up at the penthouse. I let her in, curious to see what she had to say. You've destroyed everything, she said, her voice trembling. Was it worth it? Yes, I said without hesitation. She stepped closer, her eyes wild. I loved you. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You loved what I could give you. She slapped me hard, I barely felt it. You're a monster, she spat. Maybe, I said, but at least I'm honest about it. She left, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long time, alone in the silence. Days turned into weeks. The house was sold, the memories packed away. I built new walls around myself, higher and stronger than before. I buried myself in work in the empire I'd fought so hard to protect. And yet, every night, I found myself staring at the city below, wondering what it had all been for. I'd won, but I'd lost everything that mattered. The weeks dragged on, blending into months. The thrill of victory had long faded, leaving only emptiness in its wake. I had destroyed Kenny, cut Laura off from everything she thought she could steal, and walked away from Tia. But none of it felt like a win anymore. I went through the motions each day, meetings, contracts, expansion plans. The company thrived, but inside, I felt hollow. One evening, I returned to the penthouse after another long day of work. I poured myself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in the glass. It had become a routine, something to take the edge off. As I stared at the city lights below, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. My security team hadn't notified me of a visitor, which meant it was either an emergency or someone who managed to slip past them. A rarity. I set my drink down and walked to the door, my guard up. When I opened it, I was met with a surprised. Tom stood there, his expression unreadable. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door behind him, the weight of his presence settling over the room. Everything okay? I asked, trying to gauge his mood. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and stared out at the city. I've been thinking, he said after a long silence. About what? About what we've done, he said, turning to face me. About everything that's happened. We did what needed to be done, I said, my voice steady. Kenny and Laura had it coming. Did they? Tom asked, his tone challenging. Or did we go too far? I felt a flash of anger. They tried to destroy me. They betrayed me, Tom. You know that better than anyone. I do, he said, his voice softening. But I also know you, and this isn't you. I walked to the bar and poured another drink, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. You don't know what you're talking about. I think I do, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. I've known you for over 2 decades, David. I've seen you at your best and your worst. And right now, this isn't who you are. I took a long sip of my drink, the burn doing nothing to numb the pain. What do you want me to say, Tom? That I regret it? That I wish things had gone differently? Do you? He asked, his voice gentle. I couldn't meet his eyes. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. He stepped closer. It does matter, because you're destroying yourself one piece at a time. I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the penthouse. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy taking them down. You were right there with me. I was, he admitted. But it wasn't about revenge for me. It was about protecting you, and now, I'm trying to do the same thing. I don't need your protection, I snapped. Yes, you do, he said quietly. Because you're drowning, David, and you don't even see it. I turned away, unable to face him. What do you want me to do, Tom? Go back? Pretend it never happened? No, he said. But maybe it's time to let go. I clenched my jaw, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Let go. It sounded so simple, but it wasn't. I'd built walls around myself for a reason. Letting go meant tearing them down, leaving myself exposed, vulnerable. Think about it, he said, his voice softening. I'll see myself out. I didn't move as he left. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Let go. The words echoed in my mind, refusing to be silenced. I walked back to the window and stared out at the city. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath me. Days passed, and I threw myself back into work, trying to drown out Tom's words. But they lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I couldn't escape them. I couldn't escape myself. One night I found myself standing outside the house I'd once called home. It looked different now, worn and neglected. The lawn was overgrown, the paint chipped. I didn't know why I was there. Maybe I was looking for closure. Maybe I was looking for a way to move on. I stepped closer, my footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Through the window, I saw Laura. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of wine in front of her. She looked tired, defeated. The woman who had once been so vibrant, so full of life, was now a shell of herself. She must have sensed me, because she turned toward the window. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time stood still. There was no anger, no hatred, just two people who had once loved each other, now broken and lost. I turned away, unable to face her. I walked back to my car and drove away, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The next day, I made a decision. I met with Tom and told him I was stepping back. Not from the company, but from the game. The endless cycle of revenge and pain. He nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes. It's the right choice, he said. I hope so, I replied, not entirely convinced. I spent the next few weeks untangling myself from the web I'd created. I cut ties with the surveillance network, severed connections to the people who had helped me exact my revenge. I wanted a clean break, a chance to start over. Then, one evening, Tia showed up at the penthouse. She looked different, older, wiser, but still fragile. She stood in the doorway, uncertainty in her eyes. I heard you were leaving, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not going anywhere, I replied, but I'm done with this. With us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, I admitted, but I want to try. Tears streamed down her face, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel. I let myself hope. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about the past, about the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Laura tried to reach out, but I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But I had to believe that things could change, that I could change. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about finding myself again. About letting go of the pain, the anger, the need to win at all costs. I wasn't there yet, but for the first time in a long time, I could see the path ahead. And I was willing to take it. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of healing and unresolved wounds. Tia and I spoke more often, carefully navigating conversations that once would have felt natural. She was hesitant at first, testing the boundaries of our fragile relationship. I could see the hurt in her eyes, a reflection of my own regret. Trust wasn't something we could rebuild overnight, but we were trying. Laura, on the other hand, remained distant. She sent occasional messages, short, polite, and devoid of any real emotion. I left them unanswered. I wasn't ready to face her. Maybe I never would be. She was a reminder of everything I'd lost and everything I'd become. The wounds she inflicted cut too deep, and I wasn't sure they would ever fully heal. One evening, Tia came to the penthouse again. She looked stronger, more determined. She'd started working part-time, trying to earn back some of the money she'd lost when everything fell apart. I admired her resilience, even if it was hard to reconcile with the betrayal that had come before. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing just inside the door. "Of course," I said, motioning for her to sit. She chose a spot near the window where the city lights cast a soft glow over her face. "I need to say something," she began, her voice steady but strained. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you." I nodded, letting her continue. "When everything started falling apart, I thought about what you said, about choices and consequences. You were right. I made my choice and I have to live with it." "Tia," I started, but she held up a hand. "Please, let me finish," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I want to be better. I want to earn back your trust. I don't expect it to happen overnight, but I'm willing to try." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her again. But trust was a fragile thing, and it had been shattered too many times. "I appreciate that," I said finally, "and I want to believe you, but it's going to take time." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking for anything else." We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of our shared past pressing down on us. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work, not as a means of escape, but as a way to find balance. I'd neglected my own happiness for too long, focusing solely on success and revenge. It was time to change that. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd pushed away in my pursuit of perfection. I went out more, experienced life beyond the confines of my office. Slowly, the world started to feel a little less suffocating. One afternoon, I received a package at the penthouse. No return address, no sender. I opened it carefully, half expecting it to be some final jab from Laura or Kenny. But inside was a simple photo album. I recognized it immediately. It was the same album Laura had been looking at the night I'd seen her through the house's security feed. I flipped through the pages slowly. Pictures of birthdays, vacations, and quiet moments at home. Smiles that once felt real but now seemed like a cruel joke. Yet as I turned the pages, something else emerged. There were moments of genuine happiness, ones that couldn't have been faked, even by her. A note fell from between the pages. It was short, handwritten in Laura's familiar script. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but not everything was a lie. I hope you can find some peace." I stared at the note for a long time, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't fully understand. Anger, sadness, nostalgia. It was all there, tangled up in a mess I didn't know how to unravel. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her, but maybe forgiveness wasn't the point. Maybe it was about finding a way to move on. I tucked the note back into the album and set it aside. I wasn't ready to throw it away, but I wasn't ready to dwell on it either. It would sit there as a reminder of the past, a past I was determined not to repeat. A few days later, Tia asked if we could visit the old house. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to face it. But in the end, I agreed. It was time to confront the ghosts that haunted me. We walked through the empty rooms together, the silence oppressive. The house felt different, smaller somehow. The memories that had once filled it were now just echoes, reminders of what had been lost. In the kitchen, Tia paused, her eyes lingering on the spot where everything had come crashing down. I'm sorry, she said again, tears streaming down her face. I didn't have the words to comfort her, so I did the only thing I could. I pulled her into a hug, holding on tight as if it could somehow erase the pain. It couldn't, but it was a start. We left the house together, the past still with us but no longer controlling us. It was a long road ahead, but I was willing to walk it. As the weeks turned into months, things slowly began to change. Trust was rebuilt, one step at a time. There were setbacks, moments of doubt and anger, but we pushed through. I focused on the future, on the people who mattered. I let go of the anger and the need for revenge. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding a way to live again, to move forward without being defined by the past. I wasn't there yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be . And that was enough. Here's the next story. I have a spouse. We must put an end to this, so I must tell you. My hubby is beginning to act suspiciously. And even though I love you so much, I can't jeopardize our marriage. However, you never don a wedding band. After over 2 months of dating, you suddenly throw this at me. Sam, I'm so sorry. I realized that I never stated whether or not I was married, and to be honest, a female will not wear her diamond wedding ring if she wants to have a little fun. Sitting on the edge of the bed in the Hilton Hotel in downtown Sacramento, California, I was more than astonished. 2 months prior, at the hotel bar, I had met Joe short for Jose. I quote, M. Sam Mefford, and I work in Spokane, Washington at our family's grocery store. I travel around Central California at this time of year, haggling over the cost of fruits and vegetables. Within the previous 2 months, every 10 days or so, I've been visiting Sacramento. I met Joe on my first trip, and we clicked immediately. She informed me that she was a sales representative for a large pharmaceutical business in her territory, which included Denver and California. Joe was around 168 centimeters tall, had long legs, an incredible body, and dazzlingly bright blue eyes. She was 32 years old, whereas I was 29. She immediately captured my attention. I need to take a time to reflect and share a few key facts about myself. I quote, am single. To start. Although I haven't found the one yet, I'm actively searching. I don't go into bed with women right away. This time, however, Joe was an exception. Naturally, 2 hours after meeting, we had sex. Cheap flings don't interest me. I'd like to live with a decent woman. Therefore, it is usually only after getting to know someone that physical attraction occurs. Joe was an exception once more, but she seemed to have a very unique quality. Second, married ladies are never the ones I sleep with. For a period, the narrative is over. Anyone who violates their marital vows and promises is something I detest. I don't mind if you want to sleep with anybody you want. Remain unmarried. But I forsake everyone else the instant you say it. You quote re-swearing allegiance. Beyond the fact that I detest cheats. The last thing I want is to become the object of an angry husband. I want to live a long life and pass away with my kids and grandkids by my side, not in a seedy alley thrashed to death by a man who will not allow anyone to take what is not theirs. Under no circumstances will I ever stray from this code. I quote, V had a lot of married women try to flirt with me. I'm in good shape, but I'm neither Brad Pitt nor George Clooney. I am quick-witted and have a sharp mind. I'm also a terrific listener because I genuinely care about others. An excellent listener is adored by all women. It takes me roughly 2 seconds to spot a possible cheating wife. I quote, am usually firm, but I try to be kind. I don't date or have sex with married ladies, but I'm flattered, something like that. Naturally, this gets me a slap attempt or maybe a death stare. I don't mind. Either it's preferable to being hit in the back of the head by a baseball bat or realizing you're just another self-centered idiot. I quote, V got enough imperfections already. Because we were both in town for work, I believed I may fall in love with this woman, and now I'm in a hotel room with her for the 6th time in 2 months. Sharing a room and spending time together was simple. We also went bicycling in the neighboring mountains, visited Napa, and went on a historic river trip. Although the sex was fantastic, I felt that our time together was even more remarkable because of our developing friendship. I'm thinking, wow, now, apologies, repeat that. Are you married? Indeed. I'm sorry to have told you this, Sam. I enjoy spending time with you and truly like you. However, I live with my spouse and two small children. I can't abandon my family or do anything to hurt them. Do you have children? Josh and Michael are two amazing boys. Do you want to view their photos? They're very cute. Absolutely not. I'd rather not see their photos. What on earth? How could you have done this to me, Joe? How did you set me up in this manner? I was unaware of your marital status. I might have bought you a drink when we first met if you had told me, however, I would have left with grace. Married women are not my sexual partners. I didn't want to tell you, Sam, so I didn't. You were interesting and attractive. I wanted to learn more about you. I wanted some excitement in my life, even though I adore my husband. If I was certain, I would have continued to visit you. Tom would never know, you quote, a wonderful man and a wonderful partner. I must have appeared to be a deer in headlights, an utterly dumbfounded moron, or perhaps both simultaneously. I was unable to speak, but I could hear a gurgling sound coming from my throat. Have I entered a twisted twilight zone of some sort? By the minute, Joe was making things worse. I fell in love with Tom right away when we first met in high school. Since then, we have been together after falling passionately in love. Although he's a fantastic man, possibly the best person I know, I started to wonder about folks who weren't in my marriage. How might a brief affair with a different man feel? If Tom were better or different, would I love him more? Would my marriage survive? I felt compelled to investigate everything on my own and test the waters. You understand, I'm sure. For another minute or so, she continued to babble, but all I could hear was blah, blah, blah. At last, I began to stop talking to her and get over it. Stop talking for a minute, Joe. Go ahead and don't be angry with me, Sam. I am aware that this is unexpected, but you are probably aware of that. This will most likely have to end after this weekend. Since it was early October and the grapevines were ripe, we had intended to remain a few more days and visit Sonoma. On our room, Joe was seated on a chair across from me. She rose to the bed with me. Let, quote, S make the most of our time together, darling, she purred. Hold on. Reinstall yourself in the chair, Joe. You must be honest with me when I ask you certain questions. You get it? Indeed, naturally. I always tell you the truth. That is, excluding the part about marriage. She spoke so nonchalantly, as though she were talking about the likelihood of rain in the forecast for tomorrow. This adulteress is insane, damn it, I pondered. What is your true name, Joe? Naturally, what a dumb question. Are you a Denver-based pharmaceutical representative? No, not precisely. That's something I made up. Show me your driver's license, please. What? Your driver's license. Show me by taking it out of your bag. Another surprise caught me square in the eyes when she complied with my request. Josie Phelps, Sacramento, California, 1012 Sunstone Drive. I was so shocked that I murmured. I returned the license to her. Then, like a lousy poker player faking for the pot in Texas Hold'em, she began to appear anxious. She tried to smile as she continued, See, I told you. I am the Joe, honestly. Except for one or two instances you met a few months ago. So why don't we move on from this embarrassing situation and go to Sonoma? Olina, I'm eager to see the Chateau Marmont. One or two exceptions. Have you gone insane? You have two children and are married. Those are not anomalies. The holes are so large that a truck could pass through them. How can you still look in the mirror while being such a liar? Sam, don't lecture me. All that was expected of us was that we enjoyed ourselves. I never pleaded with you to share my bed. You were more than eager, as I recall. Since I believed you were single and someone I could get to know better, I was excited. Perhaps even establish a relationship. If your rings had just been put on, I would never have wasted time on this phony romance or gone into bed with you. I'm sorry, Sam, that you feel that way. Mrs. Phelps, I have a question for you. If Tom Phelps discovered that you and I are in this room together and that we have been having sex for the last 2 months, how would he respond? Her expression changed to one of genuine concern for the first time. I'm sure it wouldn't be good, but I'm not sure. Tom is a devoted man who doesn't put up with dishonesty or falsehoods. With 2 of us, I believe he would be really unhappy. But Sam, do you not see? We must so make the most of our weekend together before parting ways. Joe, what's Tom up to this weekend? Keeping the children at home, believing that his devoted wife is on business out of town. Tom is at home with a long list of yard chores he intends to complete while I'm away, while the kids are with my parents. Indeed, he believes I'm working on a project that doesn't involve drugs. No, I speak for a handful of the valley's largest orange growers. OK, Joe, enough of that. Let me clarify. I never sleep with married ladies, no matter what. I detest liars and cheaters. Furthermore, I don't intend to face the anger of a husband who has betrayed me. If my wife did this to me, I would be wedded. I would be incensed. You've endangered me as well as your marriage and family. How could you have been so stupid? Her eyes began to well up with tears. My thoughts started to form a strategy. I appeared to relax after taking a long breath. Joe, you might be correct. It's unbelievable that you accomplished this. But maybe we should just enjoy our final weekend together without any concern. A flicker of hope was visible in her eyes. She obviously believed she was avoiding a gunshot. That makes me very happy, Sam. You're a wonderful man. I'm confident that the right woman will find you and win you over, but you're all mine for the weekend. I'm aware of my stupid behavior, but let's put everything behind us and enjoy these 2 days. Yes, we have, I quote, Elby ready to go after a minute to freshen up. Whilst Joe was using the restroom, I paused my phone and typed her house location into my Maps app. I made a brief stop at a nearby sports goods store before continuing west on Highway 80 after we left the hotel. I'll be right back. Hold on tight, I said before she had a chance to follow. I put my little shopping bag on the floor behind the driver's seat when I got back and drove out of the parking lot. But instead of going out of town, I spent a few minutes navigating my way from downtown into Sacramento's Land Park neighborhood. Although she had no suspicions, she soon became anxious. Sam, where are we going? It's not Highway 80 here. I had to take a break and go see a guy I missed this week. Joe, it will only take 5 minutes or so. Only 3 kilometers or so separated them, and she began to understand what was going on by the time we were a few blocks away from her home. You can't do this, Sam. Bring the vehicle to a stop. Go around. Please. I beseech you. Don't treat Tom and my lads like this. You can't act like this. She was desperate now, reaching for the steering wheel or me. I pulled her away and took out my new acquisition from the back seat. I aimed a firearm at her. Calm down, Joe, and stop talking. I spoke in a frightening, controlled tone. It was you, not me, who destroyed your family and marriage. I promised you I would never have sex with a married lady, and I have no intention of doing so at this time. Even though I don't know what your husband will do, I refuse to live my entire life worrying about when he'll come and beat my head. Your bed was made by you. Adulteress, you're lying. You can lie in it now. When we arrived at her residence, she was crying uncontrollably. I thought the tall, attractive man working in the front yard was Tom. As I got out of the car, Joe attempted to crawl beneath the seat. He turned and strode in my direction. I tried to hide the rifle from any neighbors who might be in the area by keeping it low at my side. Is there anything I can do to help? When he saw the revolver in my right hand, he paused. What? I know you're Tom Phelps. Listen, his spouse, Joe Phelps. She's in the front seat of my automobile if you glance over my shoulder. Now, don't act hastily. I don't aim to hurt her, and I haven't. I want no one to suffer harm. However, I truly need 5 minutes of your time to listen to me. You will never see me again after that. Don't do anything stupid, please. You can rely on me. For him to remain composed and believe what I had just stated, he must have felt something in my manner. His eyes were filled with anger, but he controlled it. Thank you. This will only take a few minutes, I assure you. Joe, exit the vehicle and enter the house with Tom and me, appearing to be a woman about to be put to death. Reluctantly, Joe exited the vehicle and approached us. I moved aside so Tom could go up to his wife and put an arm around her, assisting her with entering the house. I invited them to sit down in the kitchen once we were inside. Keeping the revolver aimed at them both, I stood there. Tom, I'm Sam, and I met Joe at the downtown Hilton Hotel bar around 2 months ago. She identified herself as a Denver-based pharmaceutical representative. At the time of these remarks, Joe was not wearing a wedding band. Tom didn't interrupt, even though his face was getting harder and his forehead was starting to perspire. Joe has a highly gregarious personality and is a pretty woman, so I started a discussion. I had a pleasant 2 hours with a person I assumed was unmarried. I've never been married and travel frequently for work. Meeting someone and starting a family would be wonderful. I was therefore attracted to a woman with Joe's appearance and disposition, as you may guess. We ended up spending the entire night in bed together after 2 hours. We then spent some time together, while I was in town for the next 2 days. I was a little taken aback by this lovely woman, but perhaps I should have been wary of how well our schedules matched. I quote V seen her 6 times in the last 2 months, each time I visited the town for different reasons. Although we were geographically close, we also took pleasure in local sightseeing and other activities. I believed I might be falling in love with a stunning unmarried woman with whom I could start a committed relationship. Tom was still listening to me, but by now he was looking at Joe. I have never slept with a married lady, and I never will, Mr. Phelps. I'm with you today for the following reason. Joe told me about her falsehoods about an hour ago. She informed me that she had 2 sons and was married. Joe stated that this would be our final weekend together since she didn't want to endanger her family and was afraid you could become suspicious. Jill sobbed softly while burying her face in her hands. Look at me, Joe. She kept her eyes down. I made a spooky noise as I cocked the rifle. Look at me now, Joe. She raised her head. I just told your hubby everything. Is it accurate? She gave a nod. Say it. Indeed, Sam. All of your statements are accurate. Tom was fighting back a flood of angry and sorrowful tears. I was running out of time. I'll be out in a minute, Mr. Phelps. However, I want to express my sincere apologies for everything before I leave. I unknowingly participated in a horrible event. I'm not sure how I would respond if my wife did this to me if we were married. It wouldn't be with compassion or empathy, though. Anyway, I need to know if we're all right. I don't want to live my entire life constantly watching other people. Despite your wife's infidelity, I still want to find a partner, get married, and start a family. I can't do that, though. If I am aware that there is a possibility that you will one day pursue me. Oh, no. I wish we had never crossed paths. However, I would never assist somebody in avoiding the repercussions of such a heinous treachery and flagrant disregard. I hope my presence here today has demonstrated my character to you. In this case, can I be sure I'm safe from you? Tom Phelps clenched his jaw and turned his back on his selfish, callous wife. He gave me a direct glance. We were all okay. Excellent. I'm going. I turned to go. Joe raised her head. If Tom had responded angrily, Sam, would you really have shot him or me? I chuckled sadly and shrugged. Well, Joe, given that it's only a shotgun, it would have been challenging. I also didn't purchase any shells. I was leaving as I opened the front door. Joe said, Where are you going, Tom, baby? To pack your belongings, we must speak upstairs. Adulteress. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.